I was 22, sitting in my tiny bedroom, staring at a college tuition bill that felt like a punch to the gut. My bank account was down to $15, and I was living off instant noodles, wondering how I'd make it through another week. I thought, my parents couldn't help me because they didn't have the money. I thought they were pushing me to be independent, to learn the hard way, but I was so wrong. They had $60,000, money meant for my future. Except they didn't give it to me. They used it to build a perfect life for my little sister, Sophie, while I was left to scrape by. And I only found out when my grandma uncovered their secret, and everything fell apart. I'm Anna, and this is the story of how I survived my family's betrayal. For 4 years, I worked myself to the bone at a flower shop, arranging bouquets until midnight, just to pay for college. Meanwhile, my parents were buying Sophie new clothes, paying for her dance classes, and even getting her a brand new car. They told me I was strong enough to handle it, that I didn't need their help. But they weren't just tough on me. They were lying to me. How do you keep going when the people who raised you choose someone else over you? Where are you listening? Have you ever felt betrayed by the ones you trusted most? Hit that subscribe button and join me as I share how I found my way through the pain and came out stronger. Picture me back then, with dark circles under my eyes, tying my brown hair into a messy ponytail before heading to the flower shop in our small Ohio town. I'd spend hours arranging bouquets, roses, lilies, anything the customers wanted. But the pay barely covered my college textbooks, let alone the rent my parents charged me for my own childhood bedroom. At night, I'd take on extra gigs designing centerpieces for weddings, hoping the cash would keep me from drowning in bills. I was stubborn, maybe too proud to admit how much I was struggling. But deep down, I felt like I was carrying the world on my shoulders, all alone. My family wasn't hurting for money. Mom worked at a bank, always in sharp blazers, and Dad was a construction engineer, always talking about his latest project. They could afford a comfortable life, but they had this thing about tough love, at least with me. They'd sit me down and lecture me about hard work, saying I needed to learn to stand on my own. I bought it at first, thought they were trying to make me stronger. But then there was Sophie, my 17-year-old sister. She had long blonde hair, a smile that charmed everyone, and she was the star of her high school dance team. Straight A student, always posting her perfect life on Instagram. My parents didn't just love her, they worshipped her. New clothes, private dance lessons, fancy dinners, she got it all, no questions asked. Then there was Grandma Clara, the strongest woman I knew. She'd built a famous tailoring shop from nothing before retiring. She was all heart, teaching me to sew when I was little, telling me stories while we patched old jeans. But she lived a few hours away, and after selling her shop, she and Grandpa started traveling the world. I didn't see her much, and I didn't want to burden her with my problems. She was living her dream, and I was happy for her. Still, I missed her. I stayed at home to save money while going to community college, picking a school close by because dorms or an apartment were way out of my budget. But even living in my old room, with its faded posters and creaky bed, came with a price. My parents decided I had to pay $300 a month to stay there, plus buy my own groceries. I'd lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling, wondering why I felt more like a stranger than their daughter. While I counted every penny, Sophie was out there living like she didn't have a care in the world. That's when I started to suspect. Something was off, but I had no idea how much they were hiding from me. It all started one evening when I was 18, just a few months after high school. I was buzzing with excitement about starting community college, thinking it was the beginning of something big. I'd saved up a little from my job at the flower shop, and I figured my parents would help with the rest. Maybe not everything, but something. So when Mom and Dad called me to the living room, I thought they were about to give me one of those "we're so proud of you" talks. Instead, they sat me down and hit me with a speech I'll never forget. "Anna, you're an adult now," Mom said, her voice calm but firm. "We're not paying for your college. You need to figure it out on your own. It's time you learned the value of hard work." Dad nodded along, adding, "And if you're living here, you'll need to pay $300 a month for your room and cover your own groceries. It's only fair." Fair? I felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. I didn't expect them to hand me everything, but not a single dime for tuition, not even gas money to get to school, and now they wanted rent for my own bedroom, the one with the same creaky bed I'd had since I was 12. I just sat there, my throat tight, trying to process it. I wanted to argue, to ask why, but I was too shocked. I didn't want to seem ungrateful, so I nodded and said, "Okay," but inside, I was screaming. From that moment, my life became a blur of survival. I picked up extra shifts at the flower shop, arranging bouquets until my hands ached, sometimes staying until 11 at night to close. On weekends, I took on side gigs decorating wedding receptions, arranging flowers for tables, setting up arches, anything to make a few extra bucks. But no matter how hard I worked, it was never enough. Tuition, textbooks, gas, groceries, that. $300 rent. It all piled up faster than I could keep up. There were weeks when I'd open my banking app and stare at a balance of $20, wondering how I'd stretch it until my next paycheck. I started eating peanut butter sandwiches and instant noodles, skipping coffee with friends because I couldn't afford it. I'd lie in bed, exhausted, telling myself, just keep going, graduate, save up, and get out. That was my mantra. Meanwhile, Sophie was living in a completely different world. My parents weren't just doing okay, they were thriving. Mom's bank job and Dad's engineering projects meant they had plenty to spare, but none of it came my way. Instead, they showered Sophie with everything she could want. She'd come home with bags of new clothes, showing off designer jeans, or sparkly dance costumes like it was nothing. They paid for her private dance lessons, drove her to competitions, and even threw her a massive 17th birthday party with a DJ and a 3-tier cake that probably cost more than my monthly rent. I'd watch her twirl through the house, grinning while Mom clapped and said, "You're going to be a star, Sophie." One day, I worked up the courage to ask Mom for help. I needed a textbook for my journalism class, $150, not a huge ask. I caught her in the kitchen, and my voice was shaking as I explained how tight things were. She barely looked up from her coffee. "Anna, you need to prioritize your spending better," she said. "Sophie doesn't have these kinds of expenses." I stood there, stunned. Sophie didn't have these expenses because they paid for everything. Her phone, her dance gear, even her smoothies after practice. Just the week before, I'd seen Mom hand her a new pair of $200 sneakers like it was pocket change. I walked away, my face burning, promising myself I'd never ask again. It wasn't just the money. It was the way they looked at Sophie. Like she was their pride and joy while I was just there. Sophie wasn't cruel, she was just clueless. She'd bounce into my room, holding a new handbag Mom bought her, and say, "Anna, you should get one of these. It's so cute." I'd force a smile and mutter, "Yeah, maybe when I'm not paying rent." She'd roll her eyes, like I was being dramatic, and go back to scrolling Instagram. One night, I came home after a 12-hour shift, my hands still, smelling of roses, and found her sprawled on the couch with new wireless earbuds. "Mom got them for me," she said, not even looking up. "They're amazing. You should totally get some." I just stared at her, too tired to respond, and dragged myself to bed. I started avoiding family dinners, making excuses to stay late. At work. It was easier than sitting across from Sophie while Mom and Dad gushed about her latest dance routine. I'd look at apartments online, dreaming of moving out, but the rent in Ohio was insane, way more than I could handle, even with roommates. So I made a plan: stay home, keep my head down, save every penny, and the second I graduated, I'd leave and never look back. But living under that roof, with their voices echoing about responsibility, while Sophie got everything handed to her, It was like a knife twisting in my chest. I didn't know how much worse it could get, but I was about to find out. As Sophie got closer to her senior year of high school, the gap between us grew impossible to ignore. My parents didn't just favor her, they were building her a throne. They started treating her college plans like a national emergency, like her future was the only one that mattered. They'd drive her across the country to tour fancy universities, turning each trip into a mini vacation. Sophie would come back with armfuls of college merch, hoodies, water bottles, even a leather-bound planner with her dream school's logo. Mom would beam, saying, "Sophie's going to do big things." Meanwhile, I was barely keeping my head above water. I couldn't afford to take a full course load, so my graduation kept getting pushed further out. I'd check my bank account and wince, knowing I'd be lucky to finish before Sophie started her freshman year. It wasn't just the money they spent on her, it was everything. One night, I overheard Mom and Dad in the kitchen, planning to buy Sophie a car for college. "She'll need something reliable," Dad said, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. "You know how tough it is to get around without one." I almost laughed out loud. They wouldn't even help me pay for a bus pass when I started school. But now they were shopping for a hatchback for Sophie? I stood in the hallway, my hands shaking, and Mom caught my eye. "Anna, don't be dramatic," she said, giving me that look she always used to shut me up. "You've always been independent. Sophie needs more support to shine." I didn't say a word. I just turned around and went to my room, pretending I wasn't falling apart inside. But it didn't stop there. They paid for Sophie's college, applications, her dorm deposits, even a monthly allowance so she could focus on her studies. They'd sit with her for hours, picking out bedding sets and a fancy coffee maker for her dorm, like they were decorating a palace. Dad, who barely asked me about my classes, turned into a tech guru, helping Sophie choose a sleek new laptop. The same parents who told me I needed to learn the value of money were handing Sophie a blank check. One evening, I came home from the flower shop, my fingers still pricked from rose thorns, and found them all in the living room, poring over college brochures. Sophie was showing off a Pinterest board of dorm decor ideas, and Mom was taking notes like it was a corporate merger. "What's going on?" I asked, already dreading the answer. "We're helping Sophie pick her school," Mom said, barely glancing at me. "It's a big decision. We want her to be ready." "Ready?" I wanted to scream. When I started college, I didn't even get a good look. The favoritism hit a new level when Sophie got into her top choice school. My parents threw a celebration dinner, complete with her favorite pasta and a cake with "Congrats, Sophie," written in blue frosting. Mom kept going on about how proud she was, how Sophie had worked so hard. At one point, she turned to me and said, "Anna, you must be so excited for your sister. She's really going places." I stared at my plate, my fork frozen in my hand. Worked hard? Sophie had talent, sure, but she'd been coasting on my parents' support her whole life. I was the one drowning in bills, working 12-hour shifts, and falling behind in school because I couldn't afford it. I mumbled something and left the table early, my chest tight with anger. After that, I stopped going to family dinners altogether. It was easier to stay late at the shop than to watch them build Sophie's pedestal higher and higher. The final straw came a few weeks before Sophie's move-in day. I pulled into the driveway after a long shift, bone-tired, and saw a shiny new hatchback parked there. At first, I thought it was a friend's car, but then Sophie came running out, squealing. "They got me a car!" She was practically bouncing, her blonde hair swinging as she hugged Mom. I just stood there, staring at the car, my old sedan creaking behind me. Later that night, I overheard Mom and Dad talking about Sophie's allowance. $500 a month for groceries, gas, and a little fun. I was living on peanut butter and instant noodles, and they were making sure Sophie could buy lattes without a second thought. I wanted to barge in and yell, to demand why they thought this was okay, but I knew it wouldn't change anything. They'd just say, "Sophie needs this," or "It's not about favoritism." So I kept my mouth shut, but something inside me was breaking. Sophie, of course, didn't see it. She'd pop into my room, all smiles, showing me pictures of her, dorm setup, or chattering about how excited she was for college. One time she said, "Anna, you're so lucky you got to figure out independence early. I don't know if I could handle all you do." Lucky? I wanted to laugh in her face. Instead, I just said, "Yeah, it's been great," and turned back to my laptop. But the truth was, I couldn't take it anymore. The unfairness was so in your face. I started wondering if my parents even saw me as their daughter, or just some stranger paying rent. I didn't talk to anyone about it for a long time. My friends tried to listen, but they didn't really get it. Home felt like a void, and I was shouting into it with no one to hear me. Then, one night, I hit my breaking point. It was after that big dinner for Sophie, the one with the cake and the speeches. I couldn't stay in the house, so I grabbed my keys and drove to a quiet park near our town. I sat on a bench, the cold biting through my jacket, and I just broke down. Tears streamed down my face as I thought about the past 4 years. Every late-night shift, every skipped meal, every time I begged for help and got nothing. I pulled out my phone and called Grandma Clara. I hadn't talked to her in months, maybe longer. She was off living her best life, traveling with Grandpa, and I didn't want to dump my mess on her. But that night, I couldn't hold it in anymore. "What's us?" she answered. Her voice was warm, like a hug through the phone. "Hey, sweetheart, what's going on?" And I let it all spill out. The bills, the rent, the way Mom and Dad treated Sophie like a princess while I was barely surviving. I told her about the car, the allowance, how I felt like I didn't belong in my own family. Grandma listened, quiet except for these little sounds, like she was piecing it together. Then, out of nowhere, she stopped me. "Anna?" she said, her voice slow and serious. "Didn't your parents use the money I gave? Them for your college?" I froze. "What money?" I asked, my heart pounding. There was a long pause, and when she spoke again, her tone was sharp, like she was holding back a storm. "When you were 16, your grandpa and I sold the tailoring shop. We set aside $60,000 for your college fund and gave it to your parents, to cover your tuition and expenses. Are you telling me they never told you about it?" I felt like I'd been hit by a truck. "No," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "They never said a word. I've been paying for everything myself." Grandma let out a heavy sigh, the kind that carried years of disappointment. "Anna, that money was for you," she said. "We wanted you to have a chance to chase your dreams without struggling. If I'd known they were doing this—" She trailed off, but I could hear the anger in her voice. It took me a second to process. All this time I'd been told my parents couldn't afford to help me, that I had to learn the hard way. But they'd had $60,000, money meant for me, and they'd kept it from me. They'd let me work myself to death while they spent it on Sophie. "What do you think they did with it?" I asked, my voice shaking. "I don't know," Grandma said, and now she sounded furious. "But I'm going to find out." She paused, then added, "Anna, you're not alone in this. I'm going to handle it. You just focus on school, okay?" For the first time in years, I felt a flicker of relief. I'd been carrying this weight alone, thinking no one saw me, but Grandma did. "Thanks, Grandma," I said, trying not to cry. "Any time, sweetheart," she said. "And Anna, you're stronger than they know." When I hung up, the tears came again. But this time they weren't just pain. There was anger, yes, but also hope. I didn't know what Grandma was going to do, but I knew she meant every word, and that changed everything. After that call with Grandma Clara, I knew I couldn't stay in that house anymore. The weight of my parents' betrayal, the $60,000 they'd stolen from me to fund Sophie's perfect life, was too much. I didn't tell them I was leaving. I just packed my bags that night, stuffing clothes and a few old photos into a duffel bag. Sophie poked her head into my room at one point, her eyebrows raised. "What's going on?" she asked, like she had no clue. "I'm moving out," I said, zipping up my bag. "Ask Mom and Dad why." She blinked, confused, but I didn't owe her an explanation. I grabbed my keys, left a note on the kitchen counter that said, "I'm with Grandma. Don't call me," and walked out the door. Driving away from that house, I felt lighter than I had in years. When I got to Grandma Clara's place a few hours away, she was waiting for me with open arms. "Come here, sweetheart," she said, pulling me into a hug that felt like home. Her apartment was small but warm, filled with the smell of lavender and the soft hum of her sewing machine. She showed me to a cozy guest room with a quilt she'd made herself. For the first time in forever, I went to bed without feeling like the world was crushing me. But the peace didn't last long. The next morning, my phone started blowing up. Mom was first, leaving a voicemail that was equal parts dramatic and desperate. "Anna, how could you just leave? Do you know how this looks? You're overreacting. Come home so we can talk." I deleted it. Then Dad called, his voice calmer but just as infuriating. "We know you're upset, but we're family. We can work this out." Family? Where was that family when I was begging for a textbook or eating noodles to save $1? I ignored every call, every text, letting them pile up unanswered. Grandma Clara wasn't messing around. She called my parents the next day and I could hear her voice through the wall, sharp and unyielding. "You took $60,000 meant for Anna and used it for Sophie?" she said. "You've got until the end of the year to pay it back, every cent, or you're out of my will." I didn't hear their side, but later, Grandma told me they admitted it. They'd used my college fund to pay for Sophie's dance competitions, her college applications, even that new car. They tried to justify it, saying Sophie had more potential, and I was strong enough to handle things on my own. Grandma, shut them down. "You stole her future," she said. "Don't you dare act like victims." The fallout hit Sophie fast. My parents had been cushioning her life like she was royalty. Dorm decor, a coffee maker, $500 a month for fun. But with Grandma's ultimatum, they had to tighten their wallets. Sophie's allowance vanished. She had to return half, her dorm stuff, including that fancy coffee maker she'd bragged about. And for the first time, she had to get a job, slinging smoothies at a juice bar near her campus. I saw her post about it on Instagram, a mirror selfie in a green apron captioned, "New job, new vibes." She tried to make it sound cute, but I knew her. She was miserable. One night, she called me, sobbing so hard I could barely understand her. "Anna, everything's falling apart," she wailed. "Mom and Dad cut me off, and now I have to work and budget. It's all your fault for telling Grandma." I took a deep breath, my patience long gone. "Sophie," I said, "welcome to my world. I've been doing this for 4 years. If you want someone to blame, talk to Mom and Dad. They're the ones who lied." She hung up on me, and I didn't care. I was done carrying their guilt. Sophie kept posting cryptic updates online, whining about how life's unfair and how she felt betrayed. Her friends commented with heart emojis, telling her to stay strong, like working a part-time job was some epic tragedy. I almost commented on one post, a picture of her dorm desk with a cup of instant noodles, captioned, "College isn't what I expected." I wanted to say, "Try doing that for years, Sophie." But I didn't. She'd never get it. My parents tried to soften the blow for her, sending small care packages when they could, but it was nothing like before. They'd spent years telling me struggle was good for me, that it'd make me stronger. But when Sophie had to face it, they acted like it was the end of the world. The irony wasn't lost on me. Grandma Clara did more than give me a place to stay. She gave me a new start. She sat me down with a cup of tea and helped me sort out my finances, showing me how to budget so I could take more classes and graduate faster. She even got me working at her little tailoring shop, which she'd reopened to keep busy. I'd always loved sewing with her as a kid, and now I was designing wedding dresses, pouring my heart into every stitch. It felt good to create something beautiful, to be around someone who believed in me. Grandma saw how much I loved it, and one day, she slid a folder across her kitchen table. "Anna," she said, her eyes crinkling with pride, "I want you to take over the shop when you're ready." I stared at her, speechless. "Are you serious?" I asked. "Dead serious," she said. "You've earned this. I know you'll make it your own." That moment meant everything. For so long, I'd felt like my hard work didn't matter, like no one saw how much I was fighting. But Grandma did. She always had. I threw myself into the shop, learning how to manage orders, balance books, and design dresses that made brides cry happy tears. By the time I graduated college, I was ready to take the reins. We threw a big party at the shop. Friends, customers, even a few of my professors came to celebrate. I stood there, surrounded by people who cared, and realized I'd built something real, something mine. I don't talk to my parents much anymore. They still send texts, leaving voicemails with half-hearted apologies. "Anna, we're sorry," Mom said in one. "We made mistakes, but we love you." Love? They didn't love me enough to treat me fairly when it mattered. Dad's messages are quieter, but just as hollow. "We were trying to do what's best for everyone," he said. "Please come home." I don't respond. They're not sorry for what they did. They're sorry they got caught. Grandma cut them out of her will months ago, and I don't care what they do next. I'm too busy running the shop, designing dresses, living a life I fought for. Looking back, I used to think their betrayal would break me. I'd lie awake wondering why I wasn't enough for them, why they chose Sophie over me. But I learned something through all this pain. Family isn't about blood. It's about the people who see your worth, who stand by you when you're at your lowest. Grandma Clara was my family. She showed me I was enough, even when I doubted it myself. And you know what? You don't have to let betrayal define you. You can take that hurt and turn it into something brighter, something stronger. I did it, and I'm proof you can too. So here's my lesson. Don't wait for someone to hand you your worth. Go out and claim it. Build your own light, and don't look back.